It was a quiet house, a house that had once pulsed with the easy rhythm of two lives. Now the silence was a physical presence, a heavy blanket. Her husband, Richard, had been gone for 6 months. Gone. The official report called it a robbery gone wrong on a deserted road. Richard ran a local hardware store. He'd been in the wrong place, wrong time. That's what the police said. But the explanation felt hollow. Nights were the hardest. The hum of the refrigerator filled the rooms, and the frantic beating of her own lonely heart. She wandered the halls, hand-tracing cool walls, brushing photos. There was Richard, grinning on their wedding day, each image a tiny, painful monument. The grief was an ocean. She was adrift. It began with a simple message, a notification on a dating app she downloaded on a whim. His name was Leo. His profile picture showed a man with kind eyes and a warm, easy smile standing against a backdrop of mountains and a brilliant blue sky. His bio was brief, talking about a love for hiking, classic rock, quiet evenings. He was a widower too, he said. He understood loss. That one detail, that shared experience of grief, was the hook. It was a bridge across the digital divide, a small point of connection in a world where she felt so disconnected. Their first conversations were tentative, like the first rays of dawn after a long dark night. They typed messages back and forth, discovering the small things that made up a life. He told her he was a freelance graphic designer, a job that allowed him to work from anywhere. It explained why he was new to her area. He asked about her day, about her hobbies, about the little things no one else thought to ask anymore. For the first time in months, Eleanor found herself smiling at her phone. The transition from digital to reality was seamless, almost magical. Their first date was at a quiet coffee shop. The man who walked in was the same one from the pictures, only better. There was no awkwardness, no fumbling for words. It felt as if they had known each other for years. He brought her a single daisy, a small, thoughtful gesture that touched her deeply. As weeks turned into a month, then 2, Leo became a fixture in her life. He helped with chores that had felt insurmountable since Richard was gone, fixing a leaky faucet, mowing the lawn, changing a light bulb in the high ceiling of the entryway. He filled the spaces Richard had left, not by replacing him, but by creating new routines, new memories. They would cook dinner together, their hands brushing as they reached for spices, the kitchen filling with warmth. He was the perfect partner in every conceivable way. He was kind to her friends, charming to her family, and wonderful with her dog, Buddy. She gave him a key to her house. The trust she placed in him was absolute. Eleanor believed she had been given a second chance at happiness, a rare and precious gift. It was a small thing, almost insignificant, a throwaway comment. "I hate the smell of motor oil," Leo said, wrinkling his nose in disgust. "Can't stand being around cars and engines, always have." She thought back to one of their earliest conversations, when he had mentioned a brief stint working at his uncle's auto body shop. He was telling a story about his childhood in Arizona, describing the scorching summer heat and the saguaro cacti. Yet she remembered him saying he grew up in Oregon, surrounded by pine trees and endless rain. His explanation was plausible, easy to accept. These weren't lies, not really. They were inconsistencies. He was strangely vague about his freelance work, never wanting to show her his portfolio, always changing the subject when she asked about specific clients. He claimed to have a small, distant family, yet he never spoke to them on the phone. The unease began as a low hum, a background noise she could almost ignore. It was the feeling you get when you walk into a room and sense something is out of place. The mirror he held up to the world had been pristine, but now, if she looked closely, she could see the faint hairline cracks starting to spread across its surface. The feeling wouldn't go away. It was a persistent itch, a quiet alarm bell ringing in the deepest part of her mind. Eleanor knew she was risking everything. She was risking this beautiful new life she had built with Leo. Her investigation began not with a bang, but with a whisper. With trembling hands, she opened his email. She scanned his inbox, eyes darting over subject lines for clients, for financial trouble. Anything to explain the strange inconsistencies. It was all disappointingly normal. Then she checked his sent folder, and there it was, an email sent about 7 months ago, just weeks before Richard's death. Subject: Project update. The hardware is secured. Awaiting final payment. Go ahead for the installation on the 15th. The 15th. The date Richard was killed. A cold dread washed over her. Hardware, installation, it could be anything, but Richard had owned a hardware store. The pawnshop receipt was the tipping point. Eleanor knew she couldn't confront Leo directly. If her suspicions were true, he was dangerous. A few days later she waited until he was in the shower and rifled the jeans on the floor. In his wallet, behind his license, was a small folded paper, a receipt, from a pawn shop across town, dated the day after Richard's murder. On it, men's gold wedding band. Eleanor's breath caught. Richard's wedding band had been stolen. It could have been anyone's. But the timing and proximity were another dark thread in a growing tapestry. She opened a folder labeled Misc Personal. It was filled with random photos. Mountains, dog photos, selfies. And then she saw it. A candid shot, slightly blurry, taken from a distance. A man getting out of his car in a parking lot. He was turned away from the camera, but Eleanor would have recognized that posture anywhere. The slope of his shoulders, the way he carried his briefcase. It was Richard. The photo was time-stamped 2 days before his death. It was taken outside his hardware store. She knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the person holding the camera was the man sleeping in her bed, the man who had her house key, the man who had whispered that he loved her just this morning. The photograph of Richard shattered her world. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was surveillance. Leo, or whatever his real name was, had been watching her husband. The kind, gentle widower was a lie, a carefully constructed performance designed for one purpose. But what purpose? Her mind reeled. She had to get out. She had to call the police. She copied the photo and the cryptic email onto a USB drive. Her hands moved with frantic, desperate energy. She felt like she was in a horror movie, the killer just moments from returning home. She shoved the USB into her pocket and reached to close the laptop, but paused from curiosity and a desperate need for the full truth. Back to the root directory. A hidden folder appeared. Inside, a single scanned document, a birth certificate. The name was not Leo. It read Daniel Miller. Place of birth, a small town in Pennsylvania. Date of birth, 5 years older than he claimed. The name Daniel Miller and the old news article were the keys that unlocked the entire nightmare. The tech startup Richard had invested in, it had to be Daniel's venture. The bitter financial dispute must have repeated itself. Richard, ever trusting, must have realized he was being swindled and threatened to expose Daniel. He had likely demanded his money back. And Daniel, a man who had already made one partner disappear, was not about to let that happen. The robbery wasn't random at all. The stolen wallet, the missing wedding ring. They were just props to sell the story. A wave of nausea and fury washed over Eleanor. This man, this monster, hadn't just killed her husband. He had systematically planned his destruction. He had stalked Richard, learned his routines, chosen the perfect time and place to strike. Why had he sought her out? Why create the elaborate persona of Leo, the grieving widower? It wasn't for love. It was for insurance. To get close to her, to monitor her, to make sure she didn't uncover any loose ends. He had inserted himself into her life as a form of control. He had comforted her in her grief over a death he himself had caused. She looked at the clock on the wall. He would be home soon. The thought sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through her. She grabbed her purse, her keys, and the precious USB drive containing the truth. She ran to her car, then sped away from the house, from the life that had been a lie. As she sped away, she didn't look back. She drove straight to the police station. She was no longer just a grieving widow. She was the woman who was going to bring his killer to justice. The aftermath was a blur. Police stations, interviews, lawyers. The police arrested him that evening as he returned to Eleanor's house, a bag of groceries in his hand, a smile on his face, completely unaware. Cuffed by officers as he reached the doorstep, the investigation uncovered a deep financial link between Daniel and Richard. The pawned wedding ring was recovered. The inscription, a perfect match. Daniel Miller, the charming Leo, was charged with the murder of Richard Vance. Justice, it turned out, had been waiting patiently in the shadows. For Eleanor, the trial was a public exorcism of a private horror. Seeing him in court, stripped of his disguise, he looked smaller, pathetic. The verdict, guilty, Judge bangs gavel. Closure, but no peace. Empty home, muted photos. She had not only lost her husband, but had unknowingly invited his killer into her life. The betrayal. A wound deeper than grief. The scars from that would last a lifetime. Her story became a cautionary tale. A stark headline in the news cycle. A modern-day fable about the dangers lurking behind a glowing screen. The internet can be a wonderful place. It can bring people together, bridge distances, offer support. But it is also a place of masks, a theater, where anyone can write their own script and play any part they choose. Predators can craft the perfect bait using shared interests and feigned empathy to lure in the unsuspecting, the lonely, the vulnerable. Eleanor Vance learned the hardest lesson of all: trust your instincts, that small, nagging feeling that something is wrong. It's there for a reason. Listen to it, honor it, because sometimes in a world full of carefully constructed lies, your intuition is the only thing telling you the truth, and it just might save your life.